We're back! It's the jump show time again. Dan Overall, Jake Price, and myself looking forward to another cracking weekend of racing at Newbury and Newcastle that we're going to be looking at in particular, and also, of course, looking back at the last 7 days and who we might like to take forward and put in our little notebooks and filofaxes. Before we start properly, please do remember to like and subscribe to our video. It really does help us out. And comment below with your biggest fancy of the weekend, because there's lots of competitive action upcoming. We're going to be discussing that very shortly. But first up, let's look back, shall we, at the last week of action. Dan, come to you first with your horse to take out of the last 7 days.
I mean, you could be here all day, really. I mean, we could have done a separate 50-minute episode alone, probably on performances of the last weekend or week or so. So we'll keep it fairly brief here. And I tend to obviously pick one that hasn't won. And this time I came down on Lark in the Morning, who was second in the juvenile maiden hurdle at Punchestown behind Mighty Bandit, who I'd say is probably now the leading juvenile hurdler in Ireland as it stands. That was a very impressive performance. But I think Lark in the Morning did a lot right while also doing quite a lot wrong. He was trapped on the inside all the way around, which I think is great for educational purposes, but not great for winning maiden hurdles in Ireland. That's not really where you ever want to be. Made a few mistakes, which I think came from having a bit of a lack of space. Yet despite that, and being seventh turning in, he was the only one who actually managed to make inroads on Mighty Bandit, who had a really nice passage through. Came to the last looking like he'd have a chance, stumbled at the last, and then his chance was gone, but pulled nicely clear of the remainder from, I think it was 7 lengths back to the third. So I think that was a good performance. Joseph O'Brien spoke fairly highly of him in a recent stable tour. They seemed to like him a fair bit. He was most fancied of their free runners on the day. And it's a race that he's had the likes of Nusret, Druid's Altar, Land of Hope and Glory all running. So it's a race he tends to aim a decent one at. He is, by Soldier Hollow, would be more of a flat sire, but he's had Soldier, he's had Arctic Fire, so he's known for a couple of decent jumpers. I'd say probably looking more of a Fred Winter type than a Triumph Hurdle type. Obviously, that's what first run under the belt. I think he'll improve massively for it, and he'll be able to win a juvenile maiden hurdle before maybe tackling graded company later in the season.
Yeah, I think the front two from that race could be very smart. I particularly like the winner, but as you say, Lark in the Morning was really eye-catching too. Jake, what about you? Where are you going for us?
Yeah, as Dan said, could have done a whole podcast on reviewing. We did do a Twitter Spaces, so that you can check out. I'll put the link in the description. You can go check that out if you want to hear some of our thoughts across the weekend's action. But anyway, going forward, Chianti Classico is the one that I've taken as my horse to take forward, because I just think that he really could be a proper Ultimo horse. I know it's been quite well touted on Twitter and stuff over the last couple of days, but he obviously won at Saturday at Ascot, and it was a performance where he had to dig quite deep. You know, he was odds-on favourite to win the race. He dug deep, beat Scrum Disley. Obviously was giving away a lot of weight to that horse. So it was a good performance. And quite interestingly, after the race, Kim Bailey's come out and said that it's going to be another 2 months before you see him again. They're going to take it quite obviously slowly with him. He's not the top class grade 1 horse, but he was only put at £1 to a mark of 141, which obviously, from 141 to 142, which looks bang on where you'd want to be for the Ultima. He'll probably have that one run in January and then hopefully be aimed at a race at the Cheltenham Festival, such as the Ultima. I think that would be ideal. Perhaps it would be hard to get Cheltenham experience into him now with offences. I don't know if there'll be a race for him on Trials Day, perhaps. But Chianti Classico would be a horse that I definitely would think is going to be winning a handicap at some point over 3 miles, because obviously at Chepstow, he just looks so good.
They still have that 2.5 mile novice handicap on Trials Day. And
they do, yeah.
The one, yeah. I mean, obviously she's on the short side, but maybe there. I mean, they'll have a fair few options, won't they, really? If they're only looking for one more run, there's plenty of novice handicaps or handicaps around. Or can just be running off novice company, couldn't they, under a double penalty, maybe? Depending on what they find.
Yeah, all good shouts. Looking forward to seeing Chianti Classico in a couple of months' time for sure. I'm going to go slightly left field here. Well, left field to an extent, I suppose. Going to the Pro-Am bumper at Punchestown from last weekend, where Prendre Garde à Toi made his racecourse debut under rules. That is, he was second the point-to-point behind DB Cooper, who's also actually run this week. Didn't win, but Prendre Garde à Toi, which means take care of yourself. Quite a nice little French expression. Ran at Punchestown in that bumper, and I thought ran a race full of huge promise. And considering it was only his first run under rules, showed a really battling attitude on the inside of the passing wife, who had the benefit of plenty of experience, both in bumpers and over hurdles too. And held on grimly for Gavin Cromwell, but there were 21 lengths back to the third. I know that Gordon Elliott likes this horse in the Jiggins Silks, and I think he'll be winning his bumper next time. And he could well turn into a nice bumper horse, but further down the line, a proper hurdler and chaser for the Jiggins team. So he's definitely one to keep in your tracker for Gordon Elliott. Cool, that's last week done and dusted. Let's move on then, shall we, to the big action this weekend. And Friday at Newbury is really, I think, a fascinating card. And Jake, particularly, what I would say we've had a few competitive novices limited handicaps so far this season. Most of our novice chases outright have been fairly one-dimensional, quite limited in terms of both runners and competitiveness. But in the John Frankham on Friday, it looks an absolute corker.
Yeah, I mean, we like to give out on this podcast when there's a bad race, so we'll give credit where it's due in this race. And 5 of the 6 horses that are in the race are rated over 143, which is just brilliant to see. It's a very competitive novice chase, obviously worthy of the Grade 2 status, which is not often you get to say about British races, really, is it? Which is a shame, but that's just the way it is. But yeah, it is a very good race, and as such, I think it does temper a bit of enthusiasm in terms of having a bet, because obviously any of these horses technically could win it. Even Tighten Your Belt, who's the horse who's lowest rated in the race, he was very impressive on his chase debut, and would have claims, and I'm sure people will fancy him. Even I think he's at the outside of the field at the minute, but I'd imagine he'll get backed. But the one that I would say is overpriced in the field at 8-1 is No Ordinary Joe for Nicky Henderson. Obviously he had that year off and then came back last December, and he actually won on his first start back at Kempton in quite a competitive handicap hurdle. And then after that went to the Betfair hurdle, finished creditable 9th, but he really showed that it's a 2.5 miler by stepping up and trip for the Martin Pipe at the Cheltenham Festival, where he was second. Quite unlucky, really, when I watched it back. Obviously, Oroko was the one that came home, stormed up the hill for Dan, and he's now rated 149, so that looks good. Behind him, he had Buddy One, who's rated 152 in Ireland now. Mai Tai was back in the behind as well, and so was Imagine, who hasn't got a mark yet, but won the Grade 2 at the weekend. So the form of that Martin Pipe is working up brilliantly. No Ordinary Joe looks like a big chasing type. He makes his chase debut here. At 8-1, he is quite an overpriced horse, I reckon.
Yeah, and I suppose, Jake, he's overpriced because Hermes Allen is such a short price favourite. And Dan, do you think Hermes Allen at 11-8 or roundabout at the moment is too short?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we haven't had a chase debutant win this since Coneygree, I think, which, I mean, that's not necessarily saying you're going to need a horse Coneygree standard to win it on chase debut, but it certainly tells you about the test that Newbury presents. And I mean, in a race where you're going to have the likes of Nickelback, who we know what he's going to do. He's going to make sure there is no hiding place if you have any jumping frailties. He'll also make sure that Hermes Lang does not get an easy lead by any stretch of the imagination. Tighten Your Belt source goes forward. So this is a fascinating race, not only because there isn't much separating it racing-wise, because of the tactical angle as well. Like, I really enjoyed just even looking at this race to see if I could find an angle into it. To be honest, I think it's more of a race to watch than I'll be having a bet in. But there are some fascinating types in here. I mean, Colonel Mustard, it always seems like there's a plan with this horse, but I'm not sure there is. Like, we go back to this time last season, like, he was the Grand Annual horse. There was no doubt about it. He finished, I think, staying on second to El Fabiolo, never really put in the race, and then didn't see a fence again until, well, about a month or so ago. It was just, and then just started running in all these big handicap hurdles over here. Like, one day there might be a handicap in him of 143, but it's just weird to see him turning up in so many strange races. No Ordinary Joe, I agree with what Jake said. The chase debutant angle would put me off slightly in terms of having a bet on him. I do think he's a very interesting horse for the rest of the season. Maybe something like a plate in time. I can see him. I thought maybe his first season under rules, he looked very tricky. I think he has leveled that out a bit now and showed a lot more likable qualities. Very talented horse. I've always thought a lot of him. There are races in him, at least down the line, if not here. I thought maybe if there was going to be a bet, I would have. It probably would have been Marble Sands, to be honest, because he was not fancied at all to win on his chase debut. I mean, he went off 11-1, didn't he? Like, he was so weak in the market. I think Nick Slater on board, with greatest respect in the world, he clearly wasn't the main jockey for the occasion. And yet he beat 2 horses who were prominent all the way around over 2 miles, and he had to come from off the pace to do so and did it easily. I thought there was a lot to like about that performance. Obviously, did finish ahead of Hermes Allen in the Ballymore, although he was ridden to pick up the pieces as opposed to Hermes Allen, who was ridden to win. I think 2.5 miles is definitely going to suit, and the strong pace that there will suit him. So again, it's one of those where I'm more inclined to watch to see for the future and where horses may be, or what may be a great horse, what may be a handicapper. But I say, if you were forced, I had 10 quid and you said, where am I going to have to put it? I'd go on Marble Sands, because I think the race will set up quite nicely for him.
Yeah, I'm totally with you, actually, Dan. I think the only thing I'm not with you on slightly is the fact that Hermes Allen, because he's a really short price favourite, and in my opinion, far too short, as you alluded to. It does make the market for the rest of them. And with that in mind, I'm with you on Marble Sands. That was a really, really encouraging chase debut. What I think will really suit him in this race is that pace that you mentioned. You've got 3 in here, at least, who like to go forward, and it's going to probably be run at a fair lick, which will help Marble Sands because he's one of the few in the race who likes to be held up. And he came with a really nice kind of late flourish last time when he went on chase debut, and hasn't had long with his current yard. And I've always thought he looked a chaser in the making. So hopefully he can continue from that really fine starting point and get another win on the board. But as you say, like it's such a competitive race, isn't it? And I think whoever wins it, we're going to see a pretty decent horse for the rest of the season for sure. Particularly if Hermes Len can win it on chase debut, that would be something. Lovely stuff, guys. Let's move on then, shall we? 225. That's the Coral Racing Club Handicap Chase over 2 miles, 3 foot longs and 187 yards, 0 to 150. Very competitive, it has to be said. I'm going to start first, not be long on this, but I think Frero Bamboo at 130 roundabout is a very fair favourite, both given the current Venetia Williams form and the fact off a mark of 133, he's turned into a very well handicapped horse. And if you watched that race last time, he ran at Aintree in the Grand Sefton. He travelled like a dream, travelled the best horse into the race, even better than the eventual winner, Jaskiel. But I think in heavy ground on seasonal return, he just got a little bit tired. So he should know a lot more now, fitness-wise. And I think he's a very solid favourite, to be fair. Dan, what do you like in that one?
I just look at a horse in here and I'm pained from last time still. He was on the Winless Ones to Watch series. First time around, he trotted around behind Nickelback and was never given a chance. Last time, it should have been his day. And I'm still not sure how he got beat, and that's Can Do Kid. And I think they were so mystified that he got beat that Harry Cobden decided to appeal to the stewards that there'd been interference. Like I'd never seen anything like it. Like he was so like apoplectic that he somehow managed to get this horse beat, that it was this desperate appeal that he'd been somehow impeded. He wasn't at all, really. It was like there was no even the French wouldn't have even considered that appeal, and they'd consider anything. It was not even worth bothering with. But they tried it, didn't work. But I mean, he just gave Galop de Chasse that day far too much lead. He made all the winner eventually. Can Do Kid was nursed into the race. When asked to pick up too late, he didn't really respond as you'd like to see. And I do have concerns about his attitude to an extent. But I am convinced there's enough ability in there to win a race like this. And I think they won't make the same mistake again. I think they're going to ride him more positively. I think they're going to ride him so that he isn't going to pick up instantaneously like they did previously. I mean, and that form, to be fair, I mean, he did go up £6 for his second, but Arjet was 30 lengths behind. He won the other day. I mean, they pulled an absolute mile clear. He still only had 2 chase starts. I think they're going to be really after vengeance because they know there's races in this horse. They've always liked him. They've always thought he'll be a better chaser. And I'm praying that Friday is the day I get some justice, because last time out was absolutely brutal.
Hashtag justice for Dan, and hopefully not the can-don't kid, but the can-do kid. Jake, who do you like in that? It's pretty trappy, isn't it, this one?
Yeah, well, the Can Do Kid was my first port of call when looking at the race. And I think the thing that overridingly put me off was, as Dan mentioned, that £6 rise for coming second. Like, it's a hefty old rise there for not winning a race, isn't it? And while I think that he still could be up to mark 129, I do agree with you, actually, Tom, that I think that Frero Bamboo is just such a solid favourite here. Obviously, as you mentioned,
doesn't happen often, though.
It doesn't happen very often, though.
As you mentioned with the Grand Sefton last time, obviously it's his first start, but also it was over 2 mile 5 on heavy ground. This is 2 mile 4 on good to soft. Like, I think that's going to be much more up his street, because he was kind of proving his stamina over 2.5. A lot of people were saying when he was running over 2 miles for so long that, you know, he needed to step up and trip. Some quite big, good judges were saying that. And he did it a couple of times, kind of disappointed. But obviously at the Grand Sefton, he actually showed that he can stay the trip, finished off his race pretty well. But as I said, that last furlong, he just really did tire, as you said. And I think that dropping back to 2 and 4 is just going to be perfect for him. That extra furlong, he doesn't need to worry about. So, he's off mark of 133. His last winning mark was 134. So he's got that in his favour as well. Obviously, Venetia's been absolutely flying for the whole of the autumn, still flying at the moment, which, again, is another thing to go in his corner. And I just think that he can win a race like this. Like this isn't as good a race as it even was at the entry stage. So yeah, he'd be the one for me, to be honest. Sailor Whale is interesting as well, but you just have to struggle to back a horse for Dan Skelton first time out now, don't you? Like after everything that's happened for the whole of the autumn and what he's been saying recently in trainer interviews and stuff as well, makes it very hard to fancy a horse like him, especially off top weight first time out. So yeah, Ferrer Bamboo for me.
Very bad with you as well. Excellent stuff, Jake. That is the 50 grand 225, which is a class 2 handicap chase. And the 3 o'clock, which is the Coral Long Distance Hurdle Grade 2, is only worth 60 grand. So only 10 grand more for a pretty prestigious race in its own right. We're not going to touch on this much. It's more of a watching brief. There aren't many angles you can play in this. But Dan, I know that you wanted to mention one horse.
Yeah, I just thought Dashel Drasher was on the overpriced one at 4-1. I mean, I was very keen to oppose him at Wetherby, just based on the fact that his reappearance runs tend to be pretty mediocre. And it kind of proved again. I mean, people are probably going to put a line for him just based on the fact that it was Botox Has and Red Wrist that finished in front of him. And I understand that, but it wouldn't be the first time he's massively underperformed on his seasonal reappearance. So I'm kind of prepared to almost put a line through that run. And I know he does have something to find with Marie's Rock on a few finishes. I think he was behind her at Aintree and in the Rail Kill. But one of those is over 2.5 miles, and the other came at the end of a very long season for Dashel Drasher. I think if there's going to be conditions where he's going to beat Marie's Rock, it's going to be here and on her seasonal reappearance. I'd expect him to improve a fair bit. I think he'll go forward, and unless Flight Deck decides to be a lunatic again, I think he'll get an easy enough time of it. And I just thought 4-1 was a bit too big. I'd have him a point or so shorter.
Cool. The last race at Newbury on Friday is really competitive. It's a handicap hurdle over 3 miles and 52 yards. Lots of informal horses, lots of last time out winners. Dan, come to you first. Who's the winner?
Well, you say there's a lot of last time out winners. I'm going to a horse that's on the winless ones to watch list again. So it's been a long time. This horse only won a point. He hasn't won anything else. But look, Holy Smoke is a horse I'm very interested in, have been for some time. I think you look at his novice form last season, it reads very well. Like he was second to Making Your Mind Up on a rules debut. He's rated 132. Tighten Your Belts was also back in fourth on that day. And obviously he runs in the grade 2 over fences earlier on the card. Third to Doyen Star and Crebberley on his next start over hurdles over 2 miles, which was far too short for him. Again, that looks very, very rock solid. And then you'll see the P at Kelso. I almost forget that because he actually travelled extremely well into that race. He made a bad mistake at 3 out and was almost instantly pulled up. Harry looked down, took it easy on him, pulled him up straight away. Nothing was amiss. He just took it very much on the easy side. So you can put a line through that. And then reappeared at Chepstow in a time where Dan Skeltons were in desperate need of their run. And he really did travel like he needed it. He looked like he was going to blow up and finish 5th or 6th, but rallied really nicely to finish 3rd behind Masaccio and Beat the Bat, who obviously then went on to win last weekend. Quite impressive. That foot looks rock solid. He's still on a mark 118. Always looked to me like a horse who would appreciate 3 miles, and he's by Black Sam Bellamy. His dam is a half-sister to a 3-mile winner. So a lot of positive signs for stepping up in trip on handicap debut. I'd be very disappointed if he can't prove to be a bit better than mark 118 in time. There's
been a lot of chat, hasn't there, on the WhatsApp group this week about this horse. And I think the jump show will be in Clover if he manages to win on Friday. Jake, I know that you've had him in your sights as well for a bit. Is there anything else you like in that race?
Yeah, as you say, he'd definitely be on my list. The other horse that I wanted to have on side here was Ed Keeper for Sam Thomas. I think the step up in trip to 3 miles here is going to be exactly what he's been crying out for, really. He was a good novice last season. He placed it a couple of times, and then he even split Atlanta Brave, who's rated 124, and Inch House, who's rated 130 at Chepstow in January as well, which is a really nice performance. He then won a Banger Maiden where he beat No But I Will, who won over fences this week. That was in very game fashion as well when he won that race. So he showed that he can battle. And last time out, he ran at Ascot on his seasonal reappearance in a conditional jockey's handicap hurdle. Obviously, it was the famous Immortal race where he finished in 3rd. But Ed Keeper really did battle on with the eventual winner, Rebel Intentions, and he was giving him £23 on the day. So obviously, it was quite a big ask to try and win that. That horse is now rated £9 higher as well. So Ed Keeper did really well. He was only beaten 3/4 of a length, and he pulled 10 lengths clear of the 3rd Immortal. So I thought that was a really good run. He's now back in normal handicap company, steps up to 3 miles. Sam Twist Davies jumps back aboard. I think there's just a lot of positives for him. So between the two of them, I think you must have the winner, surely.
Yeah, and to be fair, on Ed Keeper as well, like there was a feature that Sam Thomas did in the week about his 2 Coral Gold Cup contenders, and he got a mention, quite a good one, from Sam himself. And he said, we're hoping this horse could even be maybe coming back for a race like the Coral Gold Trophy in time. So they think a fair bit of him. And yeah, he was the one I looked at initially and thought, crap. it's going to happen again. But yeah, so I'd agree. I may even have a little bit on the reverse forecast there as well, to be honest.
Ooh. I've got to say, I like him too. I'm afraid, Jake. He's my pick in the race as well.
Sake.
Forget what I said. Forget everything.
Do you know what though? Do you remember last week I put up Highland for the fixed brush or former fixed brush, and he didn't actually get declared, so they saved him for this race. And I do think he's very, very solid. I mean, he's clearly improving at the trip. I thought he won very easily at Cheltenham last time, and it's not a particularly hefty rise in the weights for him either. I just think that Ed Keeper could be seriously well treated, and stepping up to 3 miles looks just the ticket, doesn't it? And as you say, they drew so far clear of Immortal last time. He was well back favourite, and I think the winner that day got a fairly easy lead, and they never came out of first and second in that order, did they? It was always the same throughout the race, and possibly he was just best benefited, and also the fact that maybe Ed Keeper needed the runner touch. So yeah, I'm totally in with that. I think he's got a huge chance. I think he'll be well back before the off as well, considering Sam Thomas's yard in such good form. He's still on 25% strike rate for the season, which is amazing. 8 wins from 32 runners, going great guns. Time to move on to Newcastle. Now, before we mention the Fighting Fifth in very brief detail, we should probably mention the fact that it is broadcast or forecast to be pretty cold this weekend, and Newcastle being where it is in terms of geography, it might be a little bit in trouble, but hopefully it won't get to that point. And I think that I'm pretty sure the clerk of the course has put down frost covers at Newcastle, because I know they have at Newbury, but I think they have at Newcastle too. So fingers crossed it all goes ahead, Jake, and we get to see Constitution Hill again.
Yeah, and I think importantly, we get to see Love Envoy take him on, which is at least gives, some kind of resemblance of competition in this race, which at one point it didn't look like it was going to happen. So yeah, I mean, that's a positive. I'm looking forward to see Constitution Hill back, as everyone will be. Obviously, there's no bets in a race like this, but yeah, looking forward to seeing what happens, really.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a huge amount to say about it, Dan, really, is there? I mean, it should be a fairly easy walk in the park, a nice stroll for him.
I think if we somehow manage to get more than a minute out of this race, we really are overcomplicating things. Sit back, watch the best horse in training, enjoy, move on.
Very much so. There might be a little bit more to say about the rehearsal chase, although I don't think there's too much more, because I haven't got a singular view apart from the fact that I think Garlaw is the only horse within the handicap, isn't he, if Shishkin runs, which he's probably going to. Dan, what do you make of the race? Is Shishkin going to win this?
I mean, to be honest, I hope not. I don't really. It's a weird one. I'm very off Shishkin in general. I was beforehand. I'm even more so now. Obviously, sometimes it's nice to see these horses running handicaps. When Lompresse did it, it was great. I mean, but he was about £10 lower, so it didn't keep everything out. But now you never really see a race where you're looking through and like, oh, yep, the third favourite's off 9 stone 7. Oh, yep, fifth favourite's off 9 stone 2. It's a rare sight to see this. Like, it's and a bit off-putting. But I mean, I would not be backing Shishkin any price, really. I mean, I just could not trust him with any amount of money. I mean, if he wins fair play, I don't think it'll be all that much, to be honest. If I was going to have a bet, and to be honest, he kind of makes the market, because you can just have each way stabs at everything else, realistically speaking. I mean, if easy as that runs, I may have a little each way bet on him. He's always looked like 3 miles is going to suit. He shaped as if needing it at Cheltenham. I think he was very much learning on the job that day in the Paddy Power Gold Cup. He was out in the back. His first real big field handicap experience, I think he'll improve a lot from that. All of his winnings been on the likes of Chepstow, has been at Newcastle and Haydock as well. So his left-handed galloping tracks seem to be what he enjoys. His dam won a point. He's a half-sister to a time to Rupert as well, who obviously was a very good staying chaser in his own right. A lot of 3 mile form in that pedigree. So, and Venetia won this with Lompresse and Otago Trail. So I think he would be the one. Again, it's going to be interesting to see how the market develops and who gets declared, because this race could cut up no end because of Shishkin. But if there is an each way possibility, I'd be on easy as that.
Onwards, Jump Show Soldiers. We march to Newbury on Saturday and to Coral Gold Cup Day. Loads of really competitive handicaps, including the feature race on the card. We're going to start by looking at the 140, a handicap hurdle. And Jake, this is pretty fiendish by the look of it, but I know that you do fancy something.
Yeah, I've had a decent little bet on this one, Ante-Post. So fingers crossed that we can get a good run out of him. And that's North Lodge. Now, a lot of you will probably remember him from a couple of years ago, where he was a novice hurdler in the 21-22 season. But he's been off for 602 days because he had an injury last season, which kept him out for the whole season. So he's had basically 2 summers and a whole winter's worth of break, which obviously is a long absence to overcome. However, I do think that he is quite a well-treated animal. So he's still only a 6-year-old, which is obviously a bonus. And yeah, as I said, he was a very good novice hurdler. He went and won the Grade 2 Classic Novices Hurdle at Cheltenham on Charles Day in January 22. And he beat Balco Coastal, who's rated 149, and A Different Kind, who's rated 145 that day as well. So obviously that's a good performance. And then under the Grade 2 penalty, he went extremely close in the Grade 2 Premier Novices Hurdle up at Kelso, which is obviously over that slightly shorter trip of 2 mile 2. And he was only touched off a short head by Nell Sun that day, who was rated 135, and he was giving him £5. And then 8.5 lengths behind was Bold Endeavour, who's rated 145. So lots of form is there stacking up. He also ran in the Grade 1 Mersey Novices Hurdle over 2.5 miles at Aintree at the end of the season as well, where he was third behind Free Stripe Life, who's obviously no longer with us, unfortunately, but My Tai was also in second. He's rated 145. So lots and lots of good form that if he gets back, a mark of 142 could actually look quite lenient. And something about that is because he's been off for so long, the handicap, it does normally drop them a couple of pounds because they've been off for so long, but he's actually kept him on the same mark of 142 that he was, given way back when. So I think the handicapper must think that he's pretty well treated and agree with, my assessment of the form there. So I think that, as I said, I think he's a well-treated horse. Obviously, the big ask here is whether he can get back after the break. Alan King reported in a Sable Tour just about a week ago that he was in very strong work at home. And he was actually expecting to run him the next 2 to 3 weeks, but they're running him literally like a week later from that Stable Tour. So he must be impressing them at home. This looks a very ordinary handicap hurdle, and I think that he would have a big chance. I think he's still around 10 to 1, which is, I think, a very fair price about him.
Yeah, it'd be some performance, wouldn't it, from the Barbary Castle Master to get him back from over 600 days off the track? But he certainly is capable of doing it. There's no doubt about that. Dan, I know you don't really fancy anything this, but Jet Powered, I'm looking forward to seeing how he gets on back over 2.5.
Yeah, I mean, he's just borderline impossible to assess. I mean, the fact that he's favourite is based on all the potential he rumoured to have shown at the start of last season. I don't think you can really make too many solid form claims of him being a favourite for any kind of handicap based on what he's achieved, but he could still be very good. We just don't know. I do have to say, I am with Jake on North Lodge. He did tip me up about this horse a couple of days ago, said, just dropped me a message saying, what do you think? And I was like, why is he 20 to 1? And yeah, just agreed with pretty much everything he said. So yeah, I think he'll have a decent each way chance if fit and ready to go. It's a very trappy little race at this stage. Again, we're looking at pre declaration. So I mean, I'm looking at Uncle Bert, who was back to see if he couldn't be beaten at Cheltenham, and then, well, we didn't even get to see him go out on the second circuit, which hurt. So it's just a few in here. I'm just like so many unknown. So at the minute, happy with the position on North Lodge. I'll reassess once we get the final runners.
Okay, lovely stuff. I think if there's one horse that the Jump Show is looking forward to seeing this season, it's got to be Under Control in the Jerry Fielden. There's no doubt about that. For various reasons. Partly because Dan, I think, is going to have his head in his hands. But go on, Dan, explain the sigh.
No, it's just... Literally, Iberica Lord had barely jumped the last, and everyone in the known universe was on about this horse, the Jerry Fielden, and I'm just bored with it. I just want the race to be done. Let her win. I do not care. Just move on. These horses, like they're just such bandwagony horses that everyone just loves. I do not like. They just do not resonate with me at all. So yeah, just let her win. She'll probably bolt up. She should do. The race is pretty crap. Just let it happen. Again, I might go for a walk when this race is on. Just a little stroll around the block. But yeah, I will happily leave it alone from a betting point of view.
Well, one man who might be walking, but rather than walking, doing paces in his living room as Under Control runs is Jake Price, because I know that you fancied her for a while for this, and you're one of the people that Dan currently hates.
Yeah,
Correct.
Unfortunately, that I am in that band camp. So sorry, Dan. Yeah, no, I actually had Under Control on my radar for this race. One, Lucia wasn't going to end up coming here. I remember saying it in the podcast a couple of weeks ago that I thought that she would be a certainty to come here. Obviously, Under Control was the horse they were actually thinking of going with. So yeah, she was on my radar from then. And then obviously one of Erico Lord crossed the line in the Great Wood, as Dan said. The 10,000 people all couldn't wait to back her. But yeah, no, she's got a great chance. As you know, that there's not really much to add to it. Nicky Henderson's won the race 3 of the last 4 years, Epatante, Floressa, and First Street. He was second in the other year, he didn't win it. So but she's got the brilliant form. She's off a mark of 137 now, but that's the same as Epatante, so I think that's fine. A very good Lord obviously boosted the form, went up £8 winning the Great Wood, 134 for him. So she looked like she was going to absolutely destroy him at Sandown on the last day of the season. She obviously ended up only beating him half a length. I think she's way better than that. Going back left-handed, I think it's going to help her summer break, obviously to strengthen up. And I genuinely think she could be a Grade 1 contender this season. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But I think Under Control is going to take a lot of beating her.
Well, I think if she is a Grade 1 contender, Brentford Hope is going to struggle to beat her. But I'm afraid I fancy Brentford Hope to win this.
Good news for Jake.
Yeah, thank God for that.
yeah. Oh, good one. Another really funny one. I'm a huge fan. I just love horses that are really good on the flat, coming, jumping, and actually starting to perform. We've seen it recently with Burdett Road, and now Brentford Hope. He promised a lot in his early hurdling stages of career, but he didn't really show a huge amount. But it looks as though Harry Derham's found the key to him. He absolutely waltzed in at Newbury last time out. It was so impressive under Alice Stevens. 16 lengths in the end. Now, with Alice Stevens' £3 claim gone, and with a rise in the weights, he is a stone higher. But, I mean, you look at his flat racing. It's a rate 100 on the flat. And 133, a handicap should be well within his grasp. I know this is a really hot one. It's the Jerry Fielden. But, you know, being such a classy horse on the flat, I'm sure we get to see the best of him over hurdles. Okay, lads, on to the big race, shall we? The Coral Gold Cup, won by some marvellous horses down the years. Of course, Strong Flow, Trebolgan, Denman. My finest hour came actually with Triolo Delaine back in the day for Nicky Henderson. Barry Geraghty steering his horse very smoothly into that race. God, that was such a great ride. But this year, it's going to be quite tricky, I think. We're not entirely sure what the ground's going to be. At the moment, it's good to soft. I don't think they're going to get a huge amount of rain, so maybe Complete Unknown won't be best suited. He's quite strong in the market at the moment. And Marla Mission has got to defy that John McConnell brown patch, hasn't he? I mean, I think it was 4 months ago that he last had a winner or something. So yeah, you're taking a lot on trust there. Dan, come to you first on the big race of the day. Look, it's always a great one to watch, isn't it? There's nothing like that 3 mile, 2.5 cavalry charge, is there?
Well, yeah, so everyone kind of now knows the value of an early position as well. So it assures we're not going to get any soft leads really out in front. I think a couple have had that in recent years, but I think here you're going to get a proper early battle on for a good position because it can be so crucial, especially when the ground is good around Newbury in these big races. I went back and forth on this a lot, and I have been doing it again this morning. Like you said, Complete Unknown has a very nice profile for the race. If the ground was on the soft side, I think he'd have a very good chance. I am concerned as the ground is going to be good to soft. The only thing with that is if it maybe gets a bit softer because of the frost and the covers going on, and if it does just absorb a bit of water, it's so unknown how it's going to ride. So I'm only going with the fact that it can be good to soft because I can't predict if it's going to be actually softer. So I'm going with good to soft. Marla Mission, as you say, just can't trust John McConnell's runners. He's too short as well. If he was double the price, you'd maybe take a chance, not as a market leader. Monbeg Genius, I didn't like how he performed last time. I know he pulled up because of a lot of jumping issues in front of him, but I didn't really like how he travelled into the race. Obviously, I know people will keep pointing to that Ultima form. I just don't warm to the horse. Al Power was interesting, but then Sam Twiston Davis being on Stolen Silver, I thought he's probably got the liver chance, and they seem to be implying that Stolen Silver's their main one. So I'd have him respected. So I kind of came down on a bigger price, and that's Twig, who's 25s currently, who you may not think has the same kind of sexy profile that some of these have in terms of second season chaser, really unexposed. But he is actually one of the most unexposed horses in the race. He's only had 6 starts over fences, yet to be out of the first 2. And since returning from point to points, he was sent back to points because Ben Pauling just thought he needs more time to develop as a horse. He has been a model of consistency you have to admire. He won the Summer Cup at Uttoxeter, which is always a decent race, did that well. And I thought shaped really nicely at Cheltenham on his reappearance, considering the ground had turned against him then. It was definitely on the soft side. I think only 5 of the 14 finished in that race. Clearly was not good to soft ground or good ground, as it will appear on the race card. You can completely dismiss that. It was definitely soft. He often improves for his run after a break. He's done it multiple times now. And if you look at the trends just as they are, and I think they generally are a very good basis for big races like this. He ticks a lot of the boxes you look for. Still very lightly raced over fences. You're generally looking for on the 9 chase starts. Had a prep run with a good result, big tick. He's only 8 years old. He's won at Newbury. He's a prominent racer. I think if the ground is riding truly on the good side, I think he's a very live player at 25-1. And Ben Pauling's form is just starting to turn around. He's had a bit of a slow start to the season by his usual standards. They're just starting to come into their own. So I think at 25-1, in a race where I really did rack my brain, he's the one who appeals to me most currently at a very big each way price.
Yeah, I mean, that's some seriously strong reasoning there down behind Twig. Yeah, no, I quite like him because you've said all that.
Don't bully. Do not fall for this, right? This is my absolute forte. Like, as Willow once famously phrased, I am an expert at polishing turds. And it's probably the same case here. But my God, they are shiny once I polish them up.
Yeah, hopefully expert polishing shiny twigs as well. I'm gonna go before Jake actually because I was going to make a quick mention. I quite like 2 in this. The first being Remastered. I think he's probably too high in the handicap now to win, but he's had a nice prep run for this over hurdles, and his last 2 runs in the race. One was when he fell 4 out, but he looked like he was going to be a proper player in that. And then last year, of course, he finished a close second. He's a 10-year-old now. He's not getting any younger. But I can see him sneaking into a place in a race, as Dan says, that you're struggling to find an angle, really, but he's definitely one. And the other one is That's Right, Gino. He's also entered in the rehearsal chase, as is Garlaw, where they both got double entries on Saturday. I'm hoping that That's Right Gino goes to the Coral Gold Cup because I think he's quite nicely handicapped, actually. And the most important thing about this horse is that Jamie Snowden has long believed that he needs a trip. So stepping up to the extended 3 miles is going to really suit him. And yes, his run at Saintry on the Royal Rome was pretty disappointing, but it was such a strange race with half the fences taken out that I wouldn't read too much into that. And the important thing is that it hasn't really affected his handicap mark. So he comes here now a horse with a pipe opener under his belt, and I think he can be a big player if he runs in the race over this extended trip. He's around about 20-1, which I think is a really good price. Because if you look back to the end of last season at Ayr in Scotland when he won the Future Champions, like that was a race where you thought, oh, this is a horse who's really going to come on next season. I know that often you do think that about horses who win that race because it's right at the end of the campaign, but still, he's always one that you thought, he's got so much potential in that mark and, the way that he keeps progressing quite gradually over fences. And I think that hopefully that will be borne out this season. So he'd be a big player for me if he lines up in the race. And I hope they do go there. Jake, what do you fancy in it?
Yeah, well, my long-term fancy would have been Complete Unknown, and I'm still not ruling him out, but obviously the ground being good to soft at the minute and not any rain being about does not obviously help his chances. I wouldn't say that he can't win on good to soft, especially if it, as Dan said, gets a bit tacky with the covers going down. We're probably going to get a bit of dead ground there. I think that, that will be fine for him. It's just that if it was run on soft, it would be a very strong fancy for me. So, yeah, Complete Unknown is definitely still on my radar. I know a lot of people were saying that he fell in when he ran in that intermediate chase at Newton Abbot, but I was there that day. He definitely looked in the paddock like he'd come on for the run. Obviously, that was the plan, to come for this race afterwards. And he was also having to give £10 to Mai Tai that day. And, for all Mai Tai has his limitations, he's still a decent horse, rated 145. So I thought it was a good performance. And yeah, I'd still give him a chance here. But the one that I'm kind of warming to a little bit more, especially as AHOY Senor's running, I think that is quite crucial because obviously he's going to be running off such a big weight, is Stolen Silver. So obviously he's been put up to a mark of 157. So as I said, it's crucial that AHOY Senor runs just to keep his weight down, because I don't think that off top weight he'd be the type of horse you'd want to be with here. But getting quite a bit of weight off the top, I think he actually does have a good chance here. He stepped up to 3 miles at Chepstow in October, and I thought it was just a brilliant performance. He really took it in his stride. He wasn't one of these horses where they had to really hold him up, exaggerated ride, and try and see if he got home. He just travelled in mid-div, cruised up to the lead, took the lead, jumped the last with absolute aplomb, and stormed off up the running, and it was even eased down in the finish. So it was a brilliant performance. Obviously went up £7 for that to a mark of 157, which is, towards the harsher side for the race, that it was. But I think that with AHOY Senor in here, he really does have a great chance. He was only just behind Midnight River as well on New Year's Day in that 2.5 mile race at Cheltenham, and he's going to be £4 better off with that rival as well. And obviously, Midnight River is quite well fancied in here. So yeah, with Sam Twiston-Davies booked up, and as Dan said, the vibes from Sam Thomas saying that this was kind of like the one, I think that he does have a really good each way chance.
Yeah, and of course, it's great to see AHOY SENOR running in the race at all. Fair play to Connections for trying it off such a big weight, as you say, Jake. Good stuff. Just one more race to discuss in detail then on Saturday. It's the final race on the card at Newbury. It's the 325 2-mile handicap chase, £40,000 guaranteed here. I'm going to start, if that's all right, guys, because I've got two I like in this. One being Excitations for Paul O'Brien and Pam Sly. One at Sandown last time. I quite fancied them that day, and I was used to saying hindsight, blah, blah, blah. But I did quite fancy him that day. And he won nicely. The return to Sandown might have been one of the catalysts for that improved performance, but Pam Sly said afterwards it was because he needed his first run of the season. So if that's more the case than it being a track thing, because he's won at Sandown in the past, I'd be keen on Excitations. Thought it was a very smooth performance, and he had more in hand than the eventual winning margin suggested. And the other one I like is Bally Breeze, and there's definitely a win in this horse in the serious handicap at some stage. There's no doubt he's got loads of ability. He just needs to stay on his feet. He fell 2 starts ago when he's probably going to win, I thought, Market Raise, and then he was unseated at the first last time out of Cheltenham. He's a horse that goes well fresh, and I'm rather hoping that he hasn't had a race, so he doesn't really feel like he's had a run. That would be one of my angles into it. His second start after a wind-up, and he went on 4-1 for that race at Cheltenham last time. Clearly, Connections think there's something in that, or at least punters do, in that handicap mark, and I'm convinced there is. He's very likely raced, and I just think he's got that unexposed profile to win a race like this one from towards the bottom of the weight. So those are the two that I'd be keen on in that final race. Jake, who do you like in this, if anything?
Yeah, well, I was quite pleased actually to see that Massachusetts didn't get declared for the Friday, because I just think he's got a brilliant chance here. I think this is a race where I quite like looking at 2-mile handicap chases, because I do think that you can get some decent angles in them. And I think this race is full of either exposed types or just types that don't really excite me. And Massachusetts is obviously the one exciting horse in the race, in my opinion, that I think is, could just be such a good chaser this year. He absolutely bolted up on his chase debut at over 2 miles at Aintree in October. He beat General Officer by 12 lengths that day. He's a 120 rated horse, so it was a good performance. Like Pembroke was down in the field, etc. So he ran really well there. He then went back to Aintree last month for one of the open 2-mile handicap chases, and unfortunately this time they took out obviously all the fences in the home straight, which really didn't suit him, because the way that he jumped the first time, like fences are just he just wants as many fences as he can get. So unfortunately they took him out. And he still ran an absolute cracker. Like, he was only being 3/4 of a length by J-Lo, who's rated 135, obviously trained by Venetia Williams, and a horse that was on my radar the whole of last season. Obviously went and won that. And he's running on Friday in the Falk Wayne Trophy at Newbury as well, so he could boost the form too. So I just think Master Chewy going into another open handicap chase where the fences aren't going to be coming out this time, obviously at Newbury, and although he's up £6 in the handicap for his last run, he's actually on the same terms with Real Stone, who he beat by 15 lengths at Aintree. Now, obviously, Real Stone really needed the run that day, and the plan obviously was to go to Haydock, and they've done that plan. But I think that he's not going to be suited for the quick turnaround here. And yeah, I just really think Master Chewy's got a great chance for the Twiston Davies team.
Yeah, solid argument there as well, Jake. Dan, I know that you don't really fancy anything particularly in this race, so come to you just with a brief word on it, and also anything else for Friday and Saturday, either Newbury, Newcastle, or indeed elsewhere.
Yeah, if it was a race I just looked at a bit perplexed. To be honest, I agree with Jake, and I think Master Chewy would be the one. He's the right favourite. I completely see that angle, and he would be the bet if I was going to have a bet in the race. The horse entered in there who's also in on Friday. He is declared for Friday, and that's Russian Ruler. I'd be very interested in him and Persian Time in that novice handicap on the Friday over 2 miles, both for Nicky Henderson. Not suggesting to back them both. I think just purely because I think they're both going to progress into quite nice chases. I think it's interesting Nico's chosen Persian Time, because I think Russian Ruler he's been a bit, inconsistent and also quite quirky in his time, but there were signs towards the back end of last season he was starting to improve and limit those downsides. So I think both of those two will make nice chases. So I'm keen to see how they get on. And on an episode, it seems I'm just going back to the well with old favourites who continue to slightly disappoint. On Sunday, over in Ireland, Foxy Girl is back for another 2 mile handicap hurdle. Please, for the love of God, do not ride her dead last on the inside and make her come 6 wide into the straight. That's all I ask. Just give her a chance. And if she is given a chance, she is more than capable of winning off mark 125. So please, God, nice prominent position. Let her settle. Give her a chance.
Do you know what? I think a simple and a fair request as well, Dan, to be honest.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But she's absolutely certain to be dead last now, turning for home. I've seen this script too many times.
Fingers crossed for a slight change in fortune and tactics. Jake, what about you? Friday, Saturday, anything else?
Yeah, just on Foxy Girl, you'll get the exact ride you want now, and then something else will go wrong. So we'll just see what excuse you're coming up with on the next show as to why she's the eye catcher.
No, jeez, no. If that happens and she just blows out, I just stop me. I mean, also if Can Do Kid decides to dodge it again, stop me. Just in fact, even if I go on a rant, which I probably will for 10 minutes, just edit it out. No one needs to see that. Just promise me.
Enough.
Don't let me keep going down these rabbit holes. Someone needs to stop me.
The other couple on my radar then. On Friday, obviously there's the maiden hurdle over 2 miles where Jericho de Replanay is going to be running. Obviously, the whole world seems to be excited about him, so it'd be interesting to see how he gets on his hurdles debut. And then on Saturday, there's a 12:36 at Bangor. It's a 2.5 mile handicap hurdle, and Magical King runs in here. He's making his handicap debut off a mark of 118, and he's running 2 maiden hurdles so far. He was second to Yesterday, who's rated 121. And then he was just behind Josh the Boss in a novice hurdle at Aintree the other day, who's rated 128. I think that off a mark of 118, he can go in on his handicap hurdle debut. And then on Sunday, obviously, we've got that brilliant card at Fairyhouse. I'm really looking forward to watching it. Unfortunately, we don't have time to get stuck into every race on here, but I think let's be clear about it. He's going to have a great chance in the Dromore, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him out again.
I can't wait to see him again. I absolutely can't wait. He took my breath away with his jumping last time, and I think he's a proper tool. Cannot wait. I completely agree with you, Jake. The other one I wanted to mention, just to keep an eye on the race, really, was the 11:55 on Saturday, and that is Dysart Enos for Vogel O'Brien. Obviously, a very smart bumper horse, bolted up on hurdles debut, went 1-7. This will be more of a test for her, depending on what turns up. But if indeed Joyeuse does for Nikki Anderson, first start for JP McManus and for Nikki, it'll be some race, I think, because I know that they like Joyeuse in the 7 Barriers camp. So hopefully they do clash, and we can see what Dysart Enos is really made of over hurdles, because I think she's pretty smart. Good stuff, guys. A lot of fun. I had once again on this week's edition of the Jump Show. Once again, please do comment and like and subscribe below. And in terms of the comments, let us know what you fancy in the big race, the Coral Gold Cup, because I think, Jake, a winner's going to receive a £10 free bet. Is that right?
Yeah, so just comment down below with your bet in the Coral Gold Cup. Whoever you fancy, put it down. Whoever wins, we'll do a draw from the winning names, and we'll get a £10 free bet out to one of you. So let us know who you fancy.
The only caveat is it has to go on one of my cliff horses. We're joking. I wouldn't do that to you. I respect our viewers too much.
Yeah, great stuff. Great free bet if you comment with your fancy for that one. And carpe diem, do seize the day. We're going to seize the day Friday, Saturday and Sunday. Can't wait for the racing. We've been the Jump Show. See you next time.